And thank you for tuning in. This is Julia Maxwell. I'm your librarian for the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers. So I am the librarian liaison to your public policy formation class. I'm here today to talk you through some of the main library tools and resources that are going to be vital to the research you're going to do in this class. I'm also going to be visiting your class. But I thought this might be a good way to get you set up with some of those resources so that when I come into your classroom, you'll have a better understanding of what we're going to be looking at and might be able to ask some questions that are more related to the actual papers that you're going to be writing and your topics. So I'm looking right now at your Canvas page for your public policy formation class. And you can see that there is a library resources module. By the time you are in class, there will probably be a few more resources on this in this module. But the main one that I want to focus on in this video is the course research guide. Your course research guide is going to be kind of your one-stop shop for all of the different access points that you're going to need to find different kinds of government documents for your papers in public policy formation. So let's go ahead and click on your course research guide. It's always going to be in Canvas. I'm going to open it in a new tab. So it's always going to be in Canvas, but I would also recommend maybe bookmarking it just so that you have easy access to it. And basically what I'm going to do in this video is just kind of break down these tabs, show you a couple of things about where to search for government documents to get you started, and talk a little bit about the legislative timeline that a piece of government legislation goes through so that you can feel confident with that when we get into the classroom, when I come into your classroom in a few weeks. So this is your library guide. You can see that it starts with essential information. I've got other useful guides, so if you're in other classes that might be using government documents or other policy research classes, these would be great. I've also got some general information that's also included in your library resources module. So we see, general help YouTube series is also in this guide. Student support handout, slides, all of those things can also be really helpful, although they're a little less specialized to this course. Let's go ahead and start by looking at the essential information tab. So one of the things that I really felt like I needed when I started doing government documents research was I really needed a clear dictionary that helped me understand all of the different terms that I was finding in legislative documents, along with all the different types of legislative documents that I was encountering. So right at the top of the essential information tab, there is a little glossary that I've put together. I've also put some links to bigger glossaries that you can use if there's a term that doesn't appear on this page that you need help defining. But this goes through all of the different things that might come up while you're doing government documents research. For instance, I was really confused at one point about the difference between an act and a law and a bill and a ordinance. All of those things have very different kind of nuanced meanings, but they're not always explained. So here they're explained, and hopefully that can be helpful to you when you're actually going through and looking at doing some government documents research. We also talk here about numbering and citations. This is also really vital to knowing what you're looking at when you're looking at the information that you're going to be seeing when you're doing government documents research. So big things to know are that bills are introduced in sequential order in every session of Congress. So the sessions of Congress are numbered. So for instance, the 117th Congress is the one that we were just in 2022. We just started the 118th Congress, and as you can see, we have a link right to those numbers. So this date or this number of the session of Congress is included with the number of the bill. And again, those bills are introduced sequentially. So if it's the third bill, then it would be HR 3 or S3. What do the HRs and S's mean? The HR means House resolution, the S means Senate. So, if you see an H, that means it was introduced in the House. If you see an S, that means it was introduced in the Senate. So for instance, our example here says 117 HR 110. So that means it's the 117th Congress that passed or introduced that bill. It was introduced in the House, and it is the 110th bill that was introduced during that session of Congress. What do I mean by a bill? A bill is basically the kind of first introduction, the first document that gets introduced in our legislature to kind of potentially move towards being a law. And I even made a timeline here for you of how a law kind of gets printed. So, first we have a bill. It starts in a committee, then it goes into the general body of the legislature, so either the House or the Senate. If it passes, it is signed by the president and it becomes a law. Public laws are abbreviated PL. So, for instance, you'll see PL 111, 148. These are numbered the same way that bills are. So that first number is the session of Congress. The second number is the number of laws that were passed during that session. So for instance, this public law was passed during the 111th Congress. It was the 148th law signed by the president. So just so you know what those numbers mean as well. After the public law is created, it gets reprinted. So you might see the same law with a different citation, a statute citation. Statutes are just a reprinting of that same law. They're organized chronologically, that's a hard word to say. They're organized chronologically, so they're organized by the date at which they were passed. Lastly, the law gets printed a third time, and it is arranged by subject. So the law, just say it's a law about healthcare. It'll be in a section with other laws about healthcare. So this is just to say that you might see the same law with 3 different citations, right? Because the law will be reprinted 3 times. So I would definitely recommend referring back to this handy dandy guide about how things are cited and the timeline at which things get printed, because sometimes it's hard to know, what you're looking at, and so this can be helpful. I've also got some federal legislative process links here. I've got a link to the New Jersey legislative process if you are interested in exploring New Jersey laws, although that is a little more complex. And then the last thing I want to really show you is how to start looking for government documents. So where do we start looking? Where do we begin? The thing that I would recommend starting with is ProQuest Congressional Publications. You can see we have a nice link to that here. ProQuest Congressional Publications is really great because it collects government documents from all over the place. It gives you a really nice timeline of where a bill started, how it was introduced, how it moved through, if it passed, how it passed, all of the different details. And the kind of best timeline that I can encourage you to use when you are starting to look at a particular law is to start by looking at the law's legislative history. As it says here, we're now in the Legislative Histories tab. A legislative history traces the development of a law from its introduction until it is enacted as a law. So it kind of collects all those documents in a timeline. So you can see okay, a debate was held at this point. Okay, a hearing was held at this point. Oh, okay, I can see the president signed it and they released this statement when he signed it. And so those can be really helpful. And again, congressional publications, ProQuest is definitely the place that I would go to start to look for those. So let's go ahead and start by clicking on congressional publications here. You're going to have to log in. Use your NetID the same way you do when you log into Canvas or your email. Let's get that going. Here we go. Okay. So you can see here we've got, a search bar. We've got a bunch of different more specific searches you can do. And then here on the side, we have all of these different places that you can search. So for example, if you already know the bill you're looking for, you might just want to search bills and laws, right? Because if you already know the name, just type that name in and you're good to go. But for us, if we're kind of browsing and we want to know more about the history of a law, if there's enough government documents for us to use, I would suggest just selecting legislative histories. Let's stick with our healthcare example. So let's say we want to write our public policy formation papers on healthcare. I'm just going to type in that word healthcare. Let's see here. You can see again, we've got that PL number, just like we just talked about. So that's PL 106-129, PL 112-56. Let's look at a more recent one. I want one that looks, it's not just appropriations. Let's look at the CARES Act. So this is from the 116th Congress, so 2020. So this was obviously very publicized during coronavirus, the aid that came through. Let's click on this. So you can see here we immediately get a lot of information about the act itself. And if we go back to our handy dandy glossary, we can see that an act is a law or several laws that have been enacted, right? So they're actively being enforced. They've actively been implemented. We see its name. We see the date that it was passed. We see the bill that was enacted. So this means that as you can see, there were many, many bills introduced for the CARES Act, but only one of them ended up making it to the president signing it, right? So we could look at all of these bills. We can look at the law itself. If we click on this, we'll see the full text, right? So we can see PDFs where we can actually read the law. Let's go back to our legislative history. We could read all these bills. We can read the bill that was actually enacted. And then down below, we get more information, right? So we have a summary here. So if you're not sure if you want to do the CARES Act for your paper, you can read the summary here. Keep scrolling down. We can see different terms, right? So if you're like, the CARES Act seems interesting, but maybe I want to try something else, you can look at these descriptors and see if any of those stick out. You could copy and paste those and search one of these. Copy and paste legislative term and search one of those. Then you can see all of the debates that were held for this particular bill becoming a law and all of the other bills that were considered but not passed. So this could be super vital. We can click on these and see. So basically when you click on we'll get more into this in class, but when you click on a link for a debate, it takes you to the congressional record, which is a record of what Congress did that day. And so then you can read those transcripts. There are also debates that maybe are related but not directly involved, but maybe similar topics were discussed. Then you can see the versions of the different bills. So this will probably be very long because there were many different bills. As you can see, many were introduced, some were passed, some were not. Then we have hearings, we have reports, so Congressional Research Service and other services will write reports for Congress, or committees will write reports. Then we have hearings, so this is when Congress brings in experts or community witnesses to hear about how this legislation might impact them. You can click on these and read the PDFs of those. Committee prints, so this is committees printing their decisions or their opinions within the legislature. So this actually has a ton in it. This might be a little bit too much for a paper, but it's a nice example because you can see all the different documents that are laid out really clearly in that legislative history. And then we have, frequently asked questions, reports, sessions, resources from Congress, right? So this is super comprehensive. So I always say, start with the legislative history if you're considering a bill, see what is in there, see if it's enough, see if it's too much, and that can be a really nice way. So my advice to you would be to poke around in ProQuest and take a look. You can see that in the guide. So now I'm back in our library guide after coming back from ProQuest, that there's other tabs here. So there's a tab specifically about finding bills, one about hearings, one about reports. There's also ones for analysis, which we'll get more into in class. Even if you want to look at New Jersey legislation specifically, there's also New Jersey legislation here, along with information about how to find scholarly articles, which can be helpful, and also citing your sources. Citing your sources is something that I will start talking about in the next video, but this is just a general overview. I know it's a lot of info, so again, my recommendation is to poke around in this guide, poke around in some legislative histories, so that when I come to your class, we can really hit the ground running. I can answer your questions. We can go over in more depth, more about how to get going with some research for your papers. All right, so thank you again. This is Julia Maxwell. You can see my contact info. It's all over the Canvas page, all over this library guide. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any assistance. Thanks.